Hi there, and thanks so much for tuning into the trade setup right here on BloombergQuint Live. I'm Neeraj Shah, and it's the start of a new week. Not a very heavy results week from a Nifty perspective, but lots happening across the world, and that should keep us occupied. I must say the market moved the way it is right now. Everybody will be hoping that the good times continue, and within that, a lot of pockets that are pretty exciting today. So first, let's get a hang of what the world markets are doing. Remember, US had a very good Friday, so I think Nasdaq, Dow, S&P, all of them had actually gone up quite a bit. So the world markets, at least on Friday's session, did really well for themselves. They'll come up on your screen in a minute. And keep in mind, I think there should be some percolation, despite the fact that the G7 nations have reached an agreement for the Nasdaq. So reached an agreement for the tech-heavy, rather the minimum corporate taxation, and that might hurt the tech companies. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me this morning. Anyways, so that's the long and short of what the world markets are doing. And there's this, by the way, the world trade for now, while it's resumed, there is a slight difference to the nature and the color and the texture of the trade. There's this chart on the Bloomberg terminal, which shows how, okay, this is of course the US markets. So lovely setting out there, a dab of green across, which is great. But there's a chart on the Bloomberg terminal which shows how the terms of trade have completely collapsed in China compared to what it was. Now, what does this mean? Typically, when terms of trade decrease, which means that the price of imports become more expensive than exports. And typically in the long run, that's declining standard of living, etc., and all of that. But I don't think that's something that this chart is trying to say. What's essentially saying that how China probably is paying a lot more for its imports and it's been able to export. Now, of course, they've been a big commodity importer, and we know what's happening to commodity prices. So I presume that's the primary reason for this to happen. But it also shows how maybe what's happening around the Chinese export scene, which has not happened in the past few years. So, but I reckon this is largely a factor of imports and export. I don't quite remember last time such a decline happened there. Pretty interesting. What is Asia doing today? What is SGX Nifty doing today? Let's just get a sense of that. So great day for US then, but not quite the same for the Asian bourses this morning. So flattish performance, if you will. Hang Seng in particular has come off, but the others flattish, nothing too dramatic. Let's get the SGX Nifty up on the screen and try and see what that is doing in the session today. What is indicating? I think there might be, there's some bit of green today on the screen, and which is actually not a bad thing. It's come off a little bit from the highs. I think people would welcome this. As long as the indices stay half buoyant or don't crack too much, I think the story within might continue. But I do think the story within is also coming under question, right? So that's something that you've got to keep in mind. Why do I say that? Actually, for the last chart that we want to bring in, that the MOV function on the Bloomberg terminal, which just shows what happened last week, right? So look at that. The market breadth was nowhere as strong as it was for the better part of the week. Last week, we had one day when the market breadth was reversed. Otherwise, the market breadth was pretty strong. In Friday's session, it was just about even Stevens, 264 to 234. So nothing to take home from. But a bunch of financials did very well. And look at that. The top 5 names are all financials, and then a couple of auto anchors thrown in. But that's the beauty. I mean, last week we had a lot of gains, particularly in Friday's session for some of the financials. And I dare say some of that might come under question today. And I'll get to that also why. But first, what does all of this imply for the index? So there's this chart in the weekly story that Dr. C.K. Narayan writes on the BloombergQuint platform, and we'll get that up on the screen. Urge you to go and read about it a little bit if you want to. The last chart in this story, this is of course the story that I'm talking about, but if you can scroll down a bit further, one more chart below, I think that this is Nifty Futures Daily. But the VIX has completely come off. And that shows actually that there was a bit of a collapse there. But the Nifty Futures monthly chart, sorry, did I confuse? This is what we want. So look at this. I think what we're trying to say, what Dr. C.K. Narayan is trying to say as well, and I would urge you to read it, is that we are now hitting a point wherein we might hit some resistances at around 16,000, both on the price and the volume front. It is something that to take notice of. That we've all argued about how the index has a smooth run to 16,000. Gautam Shah spoke about it in the presentation as well. Point is, At some point of time, we'll hit a peak wherein the index will not do much more. And I think that's the question that you will ask yourself, that are we at that stage yet? I don't quite know. Frankly, if you look at the FI buying, that is positive for banking. In Friday's session as well, we had some positive moves from the FIs, and FIs buying is positive for banks. But I think the caution from Bajaj Finance may impact the BFSI sentiment in the session today. And therefore, what remains in focus is oil, because crude is holding up. Inventories are strong, cast over the Iran-US nuclear deal. So a shadow around Iran-US nuclear deal. So that stays in focus. Bioenergy stays in focus. Prime Minister Modi launched that whole ethanol drive, so to say, on Saturday. So therefore, bioenergy remains in focus. And I think the economy opening up theme certainly remains in focus. Maharashtra and Mumbai in particular are opening up to level 3 starting today. So I think there will be some activity and enthusiasm around those pockets. So if you see an odd hotel stock, an airline stock, some of the others shooting up, don't be surprised. It's a result of that. What are the stocks that you should focus on based on news today? I think it can't get bigger than Bajaj Finance, isn't it? So that's the biggest one. So this is what they have said. And there are a lot of things that they have said, which I want to bring to focus today. They're saying that the bounce rate in April and June quarter is 1.08x of the rate in January to March due to the severity of the second wave. If it's hitting Bajaj Finance, rest assured it's hitting everybody else too in the NBFC space. They expect the gross and the net NPAs to be higher in Q1 and Q2 due to collection constraints. That's the primary point, that there are constraints around the employees going out and being able to do the collections from the borrowers. 1,300 crore, and they expect the incremental credit cost to be higher than the planned credit cost in FY22, which is also quite stunning. I mean, it's high, so to say. The B2B and the auto finance businesses were the worst hit due to the lockdown in April and May, and they estimate 4,000 crores to 5,000 crores worth of impact on the AUM growth plan in FY22. Remember, this is after they put out their FY22 estimates just a while back, so soon. And Bajaj Finance, which is able to get a gauge of most things very, very quickly, in such a short span of time, is seeing a growth cut, is seeing credit cost elevation, is seeing collection efficiency issues. And if Bajaj Finance is getting that, then I can bet your last dollar that the others are getting that too. That's the problem. Now, the thing is, so Bernstein, for example, put out a note on Bajaj Finance saying that they don't believe that this will be too, I mean, there will be incremental upsides, but their target price is 7240. Of course, other brokerages have cut target prices too. But I think you've got to be careful if you're going out and shorting Bajaj Finance after it starts off with a bit of a gap down. I reckon it could, because this is the bluest of the blue chips. And I think there'll be some buying that will come in. The problem is what could happen to others. Now, CLSA has written a very good note on how you can extrapolate this to others. They are actually saying that don't extrapolate what's happening to Bajaj Finance to the large banks, because they will not get impacted in the same way on the credit cost front, because the cost of funding is definitely better. They do believe, though, that the mid-sized banks, which are not well provided for, could be at risk due to earnings estimates. Now, viewers, this is important, remember, because all large banks have adequately provided for FY22. Remember, HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank, all of them had fairly elevated provisions even in Q4, because they were providing for higher cost in FY22. Now, sure, they could come out and do a bit more, but that will be incremental. It will not be a surprise out of the blue. That's the point you got to keep in mind. So don't extrapolate to the large banks, but the mid-sized banks, yes. And let's get that plate up on the screen. So some of the mid-sized banks are not well provided for and could be risk to earnings estimates. And the alert that I've put in is something that CLS has put in their note as well, that they had recently downgraded Bandhan Bank to underperform. Because remember, sometime back I had spoken about the ambit note on Bandhan Bank as well, wherein they believe that some of the cuts could start off for Bandhan very, very quickly. So I think you want to watch out for some of these stocks, because these are the ones that could get impacted a lot more than what a Bajaj Finance would. Sure, I think BAF could have a bit of a corrective move today, but watch out for the others. That's where the juice of the trade might lie. Keep that in mind. See, speaking of which, actually, Equitas Small Finance Bank came out with a note as well, and they have said that the collection efficiency in the month of May stood at 77.8% versus 105% in April, and the billing efficiency too declined versus April's 84%. So one of them has actually come out and said this. I do watch out. I actually have some bad news today this morning, isn't it? Ganesha Ecosphere, a small cap stock, has actually come out and said that there was a major fire, and the fire caused major damage to the building, machinery, raw material, and finished goods, everything. That's not good news. And yeah, actually, maybe a few years ago, I wouldn't have spoken of Ganesha Ecosphere, but the stock has multiplied 10x in the last 7-8 years. So it's certainly gained in market cap. I just thought it was pertinent to bring it. Varroc Engineering came out with numbers wherein revenues were up about 4%, EBITDA margin declined quite sharply quarter on quarter, and the net loss of 144 crores. Typically don't compare engineering companies on a quarter on quarter basis, but like I've done all through this earnings season, because last quarter was impacted by what happened in the last 15 days of March, I've chosen quarter on quarter as a better measure. Varroc has had a terrible time, so to say. Ambit has come out with a note, and they are saying that with about 1900 billions of free cash flow generation, they are 1900 crores. They believe that Varroc will turn into net cash positive by FY24. But the target price has, of course, been cut down to 527 versus 603. That's the reading between the lines. So while they're expecting FY24 to be good, they have lowered the target price quite considerably. And typically, all construction companies have actually come out, engineering and construction companies have come out with very good numbers. So Varroc turns out to be a bit of a disappointment. Keep that in mind. And some stocks in focus, NMDC, Spandana Spurti. Yes, there is Ashok Leyland as well, which is people are saying looks very interesting on the chart setup. But both of these stocks, which is Spandana Spurti and NMDC, remain in focus. NMDC had rallied quite a bit on expectation of some price hike announcements over the weekend, which haven't come. Spandana Spurti, there was some note or some story by one of the portals which said that Axis Bank will buy it. Because it hasn't come, there might be some gyrations around it. And I think I'll also keep in mind sugar stocks, by the way. There is a very large investor, Anil Goel, who did a presentation over the weekend on sugar stocks and why he believes they are in a super cycle, so to say, loosely put. So you might see some interest in buying there. If there is some buying in the sugar names, you know why that's happening, courtesy the presentation from Mr. Anil Goel. And of course, what the Prime Minister said with regards to ethanol. So long and short, viewers, BFSI might face some music today, but the larger mood is not all that negative. So keep that at the back of your mind. I'll watch out for Bharat Forge because of the notes that have come out after the earnings. I'll watch out for Varroc Engineering, not very liquid stock, but I'll watch out for it and watch out for some of the other NBFCs, which is the key talking point in the session today. Thanks so much for tuning into the Trade Setup. Have a safe, profitable day ahead, and a mask up if you're stepping out, since we are indeed opening up.